What's happening, YouTube? Welcome back to An American in Poland. I am Kenny, and we are really happy to have you here. Thanks for watching. So today we're going to be talking about Stalag Luft 3, which is really kind of an interesting place. It is the inspiration for the 1963 film, The Great Escape. Also, an older film from 1953, I believe, called The Wooden Horse. And we're going to be talking about both these situations and what makes Stalag Luft 3 unique and a few interesting facts that you might not know. So stick around, and if you've got any comments or questions, make sure you leave them in the comment section below. So let's get started. So now let's start off with a little bit of history of the camp. Now, this camp in the movies is portrayed to be built specifically for these troublemaker prisoners. And some of that's sort of true, but not really. It's mostly Hollywood. This camp had been around since World War I, and it was basically utilized for soldiers from any country who were fighting against the German ended up here. Now, it was also used in 1919 to hold Polish prisoners who were captured after the Wielkopolska uprising, and they were brought here, but it was basically used as a transfer point. Then in 1939, Reconstruction started again for holding prisoners of war in the World War II era. And this particular camp held 40,000 prisoners during its duration. Now, it was broken up into smaller sections. So you had Stalag Luft 3, which is the most famous because of the Great Escape, was strictly for officers. Now, granted, they did allow non-commissioned officers in there at the end of the war, basically just because they needed the room. But primarily it was only for officers and only from the Allied Air Forces. Now, one thing that's interesting is that Germany had broken up how or who runs each camp depending on who they're fighting against. So the Army ran camps that held Army soldiers. The Air Force camps were run by Air Force officers. The Navy by Navy, so on. So I think this is part of the reason why the Air Force camp tended to be a little bit more, I guess I'd say, gentrified. You know, it was meant to be a place where, okay, you're just going to come and you're going to hang out for the rest of the war. You're a gentleman. You're an officer. Just relax. You know, we're not going to make you work. You know, you're going to get fed. Now, granted, it was not a large amount of food, but you would be fed. And you could supplement the rest of your diet with stuff from the Red Cross. We're going to provide you with a theater, which was pretty amazing. I didn't realize they had a true theater. It had 350 seats in it, and it was like a normal theater. You know, like going to the movie theaters today with real theater chairs and a stage, and they put on full productions. There was a pool located there at the camp. Now, the pool was primarily used for storing water for firefighting, but it was used quite frequently as a recreation spot for the prisoners to go swimming and whatnot. So if you're liking the video so far, I really need to ask a huge favor of you. Make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment below, and make sure you got notifications turned on so that when we produce a new video, you get notified. The channel's growing like crazy, and we really appreciate all your guys' support here on An American in Poland. So let's get back into it and keep talking about this camp. Now, one thing that the movie did get correct is that the officers were encouraged to engage in recreation, whether it be gardening, whether it be baseball or chests or, just things to kind of keep themselves occupied. Now, inside the museum itself, it does. They do have a collection from the Red Cross and the YMCA, which was the Young Men's Christians Association, which is a charitable association, that were donated to the camps, and it's got everything from chessboards to catcher's masks, and this was all just to promote the officers from doing something constructive rather than destructive. Now, this is kind of where the Germans' generosity, if we'll say, kind of led to their own demise. One of the recreational activities that the prisoners decided to become involved with was a gymnastics horse, where they would do vaulting or, different exercises. And they built their own horse, and they built it in such a way that it would be moved inside and out each day, but the underside was hollow. And they would hide somebody inside there, and they started digging a tunnel. This was the first real successful escape attempt, and this was accomplished in 1943. And 3 officers constructed this tunnel. They dug down. The only part of the tunnel that was reinforced was the main entrance, and the rest was dug by hand. And they would, every once in a while, stick a steel rod up through so they get air holes. Now, every night, this was removed from the yard, and they would place a board down over the top, kick dirt over it, and it remained hidden. And I guess it worked, because these 3 officers did escape, and they did manage to get back to their home countries. One was a Swedish officer, the other 2 were British, and then the Swedish officer actually ended up returning to England to fight with the fight for the English again throughout the rest of the war. Other static displays that are within the museum itself are a large diorama of the camp. Gives you an idea of the layout. Now, this is one thing that the movie actually got correct. I remember watching this as a kid, and we actually just watched it recently, so it is fresh in my memory. And always finding it interesting how the buildings were built up kind of on stilts, and the separation between them, and it shows the fencing around as well as the guard towers and whatnot. Now, there is also a recreation of the bunkhouse that is stocked in the way that it would have been when occupied by these officers. There's also uniforms that are there in representation for each of the nations that had officers housed in this location, which would be French, Polish, American, and British, basically all the Allied forces. And then there's another display of artifacts that have been picked up through archaeology, of personal effects. Now, we kind of think about the fact that this has been less than 100 years ago, and we're already conducting archaeology here. Well, it's important. We don't tend to take care of the stuff from today, right? We don't think of it as having any historical value. And so a lot of times you only get a look into the past through digging it up. And this is a perfect example, because after the war, people were like, let's get rid of this camp. It has no value to us. We're going to take and just, burn everything to the ground or remove the wood or whatever during the time to rebuild after the war. And so all of this stuff was lost, and they have been digging it up, and they found quite a few interesting pieces, and they are on display. Now, when you go outside, you'll see they have recreated a barracks building, and inside the building, it has been laid out in a way that is identical to how it would have been occupied in the past. So they have the bunk house set up with the 3 different bunks, and it's really surprising to me how spacious this really was. Granted, officers are always treated differently than enlisted. So they're considered to be gentlemen, so they were treated like gentlemen. This was a big part of Stalag Luft 3, was that they wanted these officers to be as comfortable as possible so that they wouldn't try to escape. They were told, just relax, hang out, we're making this nice for you. And when you look at the barracks, it's very evident. There is a display in there with the air pump from the Great Escape, which was conducted in 1944, and recreations of the trolley system that was used underground as well. They do also have a recreation of the horse that was used for the first successful escape in another room there. And they have drawings and portraits of the different members who did escape from the prison, and they're all contemporary. Now, in one room that has the air pump and the carts, they do have the photos of the members of the Great Escape. Now, when you leave this location, you're going to go about maybe a 5-minute drive down the road, and you'll end up at the location, the original location of the Great Escape. You can also walk through the forest to get there as well. Just make sure it's a nice day. It was raining like crazy yesterday, so we chose to drive. When you get to this location, they have the tunnel, or the tunnel location, all marked out with stone slabs and pea gravel to show exactly where the tunnel started and ended. Now, at the beginning of the tunnel, you'll see that they have marked out the names of all of the escapees, as well as what countries they are from. I found it really interesting to take the time to walk this, and the amount of time it took to just walk from one end to the other was not short. So imagine having to crawl down into a tunnel is 9 meters deep, and then lay on your belly and get pulled through this tunnel that's, your shoulders are just barely fitting through, all the way to the other end, and then climb back up another 9 meters in an attempt to escape. Now, one thing that's also interesting is you actually go right through, or the tunnel went right under, basically the guard tower, and it went right past 2 of the coolers that Steve McQueen made famous in the Great Escape. And the foundations are still there for the coolers. Now, one thing that is really interesting is kind of the location of this. The movie makes it seem like these guys had to travel a long distance to get to the train station, where in reality, it's basically 250 meters through the woods and you're at the train station. That being said, I did find a bunker that's right near the train station, so it was obvious it was being guarded. I couldn't imagine being like, yeah, we'll just walk onto a train. I mean, it took some real cojones to do this. And I guess a lot of it was because the Germans thought, why would they escape? You know, they put in a pool for them. They had a theater. They had three hots and a cot. They had food. Really didn't have anything to worry about. And honestly, the majority of prisoners didn't escape. It was a very large camp. and there was only 76 original escapees, and of that, only 3 managed to escape. 50 of them were shot, and that was there, and they were shot by the SS. They were not shot by the folks running the camp, and then the rest of them were returned to the camp and allowed to finish out their sentences. Now, one thing that was interesting is that the Germans were very particular about following the Geneva Conventions when it came to enacting punishment on their POWs. So the POWs were not allowed to be kept in isolation for longer than 30 days in a stint. And while they were in isolation, they were still had to be provided for as far as for food and water. This is something that's very interesting to me, that, and even that if they had tried to escape, they just got 30 days in the cooler. Very different than what I think any of us thought of when we see the film. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting, at least from my perspective, is the location of this camp. Now, I understand, yes, it's in Poland, but this was part of Germany for 200 years. But I guess for me, I kind of thought that it would be, maybe closer to like central Germany, more like, or maybe not central, but maybe like near Nuremberg or something like this. I never really thought of it being this far east. And when you think about the fact that, some of these prisoners tried to escape to Switzerland in a car. It takes you, if I had to guess, it would be 14 hours worth of driving, 14 hours of driving to get into Switzerland. One of them did escape all the way to Spain. I mean, so you think about this, these guys were, traveling through some really ridiculous distances in a war zone through the heart of Germany. So in closing, I'm going to have to say, it was a really neat experience, getting to see the reality of what the camp was and how big it was, and realize that there was more to it than just the Great Escape. And kind of the location, it's so different than what Hollywood made it out to be. Now, would I say make a special trip to see this place? Maybe. Depends on how far away you are. For me, it was a 3.5-hour drive. I had a great time. And it was a unique experience. Now, realistically, you can see everything there at the camp in about an hour and a half. Now, the city of Jagan is beautiful, well restored. The architecture is amazing. They've got a lot going on there. There are a lot of different World War II reenactments that go on throughout the year here in Jagan. So, there are other reasons to go to this area. I think that I would probably put the camp as kind of an addition to a trip, if I had to be honest. It was great. But it's less a destination and more an additive. But I think it's someplace that everybody would enjoy going to check out. More for older folks. There's not a lot going on there for kids, unless they're really into history. But yeah, I'd say check it out. So I want to say thank you to everybody who made it all the way through the video. I want to let you know you guys are the real heroes. If you have enjoyed this video, make sure that you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, make sure you got notifications turned on, and do me a favor, in the comment section, mention someplace, here in Poland that maybe I should go visit and do a video about, something that you would like to see. I'm always looking for new ideas and new content, because we are trying to grow the channel, and I'd like to find unique stuff that maybe not everybody talks about, so that we can kind of show the greatness of Poland and the surrounding areas. Anyways, thanks an awful lot for watching, guys. We look forward to seeing you next time right here on An American in Poland.